I'm Jeremy Belsky, your host for Spirit of Stewardship.
To learn how you can better share your talents and resources, contact your local parish priest. Your level.
You're listening to the home of all things Catholic in Michiana. 95.7 FM WRDI, Napatee, South Bend, Elkhart. Welcome home to your family of faith.
Hi, this is Angelo and Carlo. By now, I'm sure you've heard the commercials about Elevate 150 from Notre Dame Federal Credit Union. My wife and I took part in the free financial checkup and got Redeemer Radio $150, so pretty awesome there. But we also got a lot more. Notre Dame FCU helped us out with a bunch of items that we have been pushing off for a while. Now we're in a much better position financially thanks to Notre Dame Federal Credit Union. Now it's your chance for better financial health. Sign up for a free checkup at NotreDameFCU.com/elevate.
Live from the Redeemer Radio 95.7 studios in the shadows of the Golden Dome, this is Notre Dame Federal Credit Union's Irish Sports Saturdays.
For just the fourth time since the Lou Holtz era, Notre Dame Stadium will host the top 10 showdown today as 9th-ranked 4-0 Notre Dame plays host to 7th-ranked and 3-0 Cincinnati. Welcome to Notre Dame Federal Credit Union's Irish Sports Saturdays, Notre Dame FCU, where UBank does matter. I'm Angelo DiCarlo, so glad to be with you this morning, joined as always by Kevin Downey. So much to cover this morning. Maybe a little rain. We're live on Facebook and YouTube, so you can watch us on there as well, trying that out for the first time. And who knows who's playing quarterback for Notre Dame here today. Lots of connections between Notre Dame and Cincinnati. When you go through the list, it might take about 8 minutes of the show just to read it off, let alone to evaluate. And then, Kevin, the Irish certainly riding a lot of momentum into this one after an incredible fourth quarter last week against Wisconsin, down 13-10 early in the fourth, and then they rip off 31 points in a row, and
they just found a way to win.
I mean, they've more than found it. They emphatically put their statement in on how they won that one. 21 of those points in special teams and defense to win 41-13. Might as well get your early thoughts on that performance and that momentum that it brings into this game against Cincinnati here today.
Well, I was definitely wrong. I thought that Wisconsin was the better team, but clearly I was even nervous about the defense, and they definitely made a statement. They just played so much more aggressive, and they kind of took some of the space out of it, so they closed down their cushions, and they were more aggressive in the defensive backfield and definitely more aggressive up front. I mean, it was impressive. Again, I guess anytime you count them out, they come back.
Yeah, it was – well,
and it was close. They always play the level of their competition, so it's exciting.
But this is different than the way they came back against Toledo.
True.
And, I mean, they put a statement down in that fourth quarter. And
it was a huge game.
Yeah, and it was a defensive and special teams statement. Chris Tyree's, kickoff.
Yeah, that was so much energy.
First one since 2016, and wow. It was
25 run, it was like Rocket Ishmael was channeled.
It was great to see, and then the defense coming through. And now the big question as we head into today, is the defense that good? Graham Mertz that bad?
Yeah.
I can tell you this one, I think Graham Mertz is that bad, but maybe the defense is much better in that regard. All right, on tap on this morning's show, Irish quarterback Jack Cohn, banged up but improving. Drew Pine did well in relief last week. Tyler Buckner apparently back to his old self. So what happens at quarterback? Insane amount of connections, as we mentioned, between Notre Dame and Cincinnati. We'll break it down. Our interview guest today is former Irish captain Rocky Boiman. Cincinnati native, lives there, hosts a radio show there, gives his unique perspective. Plus, he reflects back on his time at Notre Dame, his faith, and a great story about almost quitting football right before he ended up winning a Super Bowl. We will, of course, break down the matchup with Cincinnati today. Unlike last week, Graham Mertz, Cincy has one of the nation's best quarterbacks in Desmond Ridder. And, of course, we'll continue to chat about Notre Dame's Achilles heel, the offensive line, and the run game. And you can vote on who wins today at Ange DiCarlo on Twitter to cast your vote. Apparently everyone's buying in after Wisconsin, the Notre Dame fans. A couple of weeks ago when we asked, how many wins do you think they're going to win now after the Toledo game?
Yeah.
Those numbers came down. Now, wow. Cincinnati's the favorite here today. It's not in the Notre Dame Twitterverse, I can tell you that much right now. And let's start with the top 10 showdown. Only USC in 05, Stanford in 18, Clemson last year as Notre Dame Stadium hosted a top 10 matchup since the Holtz era. Cincinnati now the only ranked team on Notre Dame's schedule, Kevin. If the Irish get through today, you can legit start talking about whether or not this team will go undefeated the rest of the way, because they will be the favorite in every game after this week if they win here today.
Well, and I think it's just interesting. Cincinnati has a lot of guys back, and they're really good, but I personally think, especially after the fourth quarter against Wisconsin, Notre Dame should be ranked higher. But it does make for a great storyline, and I think it'll be definitely an exciting game, especially in the home setting.
No, it will be, and Notre Dame boasts a 26-game home win streak, but they're underdogs here by 2 points today. So is that motivation? Brian Kelly asked about that this week.
Not really. I mean, they understand, what protecting the home field is. I mean, they've done it 26 times in a row. This is much more about two top 10 teams, and, you got to go out and attack your opponent. I mean, you can't sit around and wait. I mean, this is a heavyweight fight. If you're just going to dance around and wait, you're going to get knocked out. This is a really good football team. So you got to come out swinging. You got to be aggressive, and you got to take it to your opponent. When you have two top 10 teams playing, you better come out ready to go, or you're going to get knocked out.
Yeah, a big start is a great way to get going here. It'll be a packed house. It'll be interesting to see if Cincinnati can handle the environment. We don't often talk about Notre Dame Stadium being a hostile environment for an opposing team, but they got rattled early in Bloomington at IU.
Yeah.
So maybe.
Well, and again, they're undefeated, but I'm pretty sure that Notre Dame Stadium is going to have a different field than against Miami of Ohio, Murray State, and then like you said, Indiana was packed. It was a full sold out game, but there's going to be some pressure for them for sure.
I mean, it wasn't like they were at Georgia or at Michigan in week 3 that they felt that, or Penn State or Ohio State. So, and then you kind of understand it in that regard. But it'll be interesting to see if they can handle the environment. By the way, this is the first time Notre Dame and Cincinnati are playing since the epic battle in 1900.
I love that stat.
That Notre Dame won 58-0.
Throw all the history out the window on.
Cincinnati much improved since that game back in 1900 when Notre Dame got the win. Okay, let's talk about the connections in this game. There's a lot of storylines beyond the game itself. Certainly last week Brian Kelly passed Knute Rockne for the most wins in Notre Dame history. Where he coached before he came to Notre Dame with Cincinnati.
Yeah.
For 3 seasons, he went 34-6, including an undefeated regular season in his final year in 2009. The bigger connection in terms of how it might impact today's game is defense coordinator Marcus Freeman. Spent the previous 4 seasons at Cincinnati as their defensive coordinator. He's recruited all these players. One player said this week they'd like to prove Coach Freeman wrong on his decision to leave and say, you probably should have stayed here. And Freeman was Freeman's linebackers coach at Ohio State was Cincy coach Luke Fickell. So a lot of connections there, and that's going to be an interesting storyline here today. Who would you say? I would say Freeman's got to have, Notre Dame's got to have the advantage in terms of he knows everybody on that team. That's got to be a big advantage for Notre Dame in terms of knowing that personnel. Versus, obviously, Cincinnati has an advantage because they know,
the scheme.
They know the scheme really well too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, which one do you give the advantage to, the players or the coach in this regard?
I almost think in this regard it's going to be the scheme because I think week after week, day after day, spring ball, everything you're going your stuff, your offense against your defense. So Freeman's going to know what little annoyance things or what things that you can break down and really get after the Cincinnati offense. And then it's great that Freeman is a great recruiter and knows all these players and there's that tie. But again, how much time is he going to sit and explain to the offensive coordinator, Tommy Rees, or the O-line coach, well, this D-lineman's pretty good, but, he has a little trouble moving laterally. I'd try to stretch. Like, there's just not that much interaction between the two groups.
And that's an interesting perspective of whether or not there was. Brian Kelly gets vague on these questions because he doesn't want to make it seem like they're taking an unfair advantage, which they're not. I mean, you figure out a way to win the game, right? Outside of stealing signs, that's something you don't do. But, some coaches
don't.
But, but at the same time, okay, let's ask this. We asked this about Jack Cohn last week.
Correct.
Against Wisconsin. Desmond Ridder. Is it an advantage for Marcus Freeman that he's faced Desmond Ridder in practice every year? Or is it an advantage for Desmond Ridder that he knows what to expect from a Marcus Freeman defense? Different personnel, but I think it might be more advantage for Freeman in this regard because he knows Ridder so well.
Well, and in the scheme, I mean, again, their defenses are so similar. You can still see the impact. And after the fourth quarter last week, I'm a little bit higher on the performance of the defense. But basically, they do a lot of pressures, a lot of mixing up the coverages. But at the end of the day, there's a timeline with this. And when Kelly said that they're going to be, really aggressive, to me, I think that both teams are going to have the same game plan. Defense, be super aggressive, blitz, do twists, always have 4-man, 5-man, 6-man rushes, really put pressure on both offensive lines. So, again, if anything, we talk a lot, or there's a lot of talk about the Cincinnati skill players, but I think it's going to come down to both offensive lines. Cincinnati's, I don't know, they returned a starter or two, but who have they played? And then, Notre Dame's offensive line woes have been documented, especially the left side. I think it's who handles the defensive pressure best because they're going to bring it. Both teams defensively, it's going to be exciting.
Well, and I was going to say to counter that, which defense makes a big play positively and which defense gives up a big play negatively because it's feast or famine with this defense, right? We saw that early on. You gave up some big plays, and now you're not. Now you're playing a much better quarterback. I mean, Desmond Ridder's first throw of the season was an 81-yard touchdown pass. I know it was against Miami of Ohio, but he's a deep threat ball. Notre Dame hasn't faced that in a little bit. So those things make a difference. All right, continuing on with the connections. It doesn't end with just Kelly and Freeman. Cornerbacks coach Mike Mickens is a Cincy alum, played for Brian Kelly, Cincy assistant in 2018-2019. Defensive line coach Mike Elston and offensive line coach Jeff Quinn were Kelly assistants at Cincinnati. Cincy offensive coordinator Mike Denbrock has had 2 tours at Notre Dame, including under Brian Kelly from 2010 to 2016. I don't know if there's as much an advantage there for either side simply because he's been gone for so long.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have that advantage in terms of knowing the
and
Brian
Kelly's offense has evolved a lot, too.
Now, he knows Tommy Reese really well.
True.
So that might help, but then he's got to go tell the defense and stuff like that. So that's a little different. Now, he also knows Marcus Freeman.
Right. That gets back to every day at practice, spring ball.
So he knows Marcus Freeman, so that might help him in that regard. Now, and also, Cincinnati wide receiver Michael Young transferred from Notre Dame, played at Notre Dame from 2017 to 2019. Yep. He's Cincy's second leading receiver, 8 receptions, 110 yards. What I remember of Michael Young, look, he's going to be feast or famine today. He's either going to be so pumped it works against him, or he's going to have a great day. I don't see him being the type of guy who has 3 catches for 30 yards today. He's either going off for 6 catches for 140, or
it's gonna be
he's got 2 drops and he's done nothing in this game. So, and that's something to watch in this game as well. All right, let's talk about the Notre Dame quarterback situation. Jack Cohn hurt his ankle against Wisconsin. Kelly said Wednesday that Cohn was farther along than he anticipated. Mm-hmm. He split first-team reps with Drew Pine. I thought Drew Pine looked really good last week when he came in against Wisconsin. What were your thoughts on the way Pine played last week when he came in relief?
I was really impressed. I mean, he was really mobile. He had channeled a little bit of Ian Book where he could move in the pocket and still throw. It would be tough because with Cohn, you do know that you have that experience and it's an older guy, and it may be good big picture to kind of bring in Drew Pine a little bit at a time. But honestly, fourth quarter, kind of like the defense went off, I thought that he really settled in and played really well. And again, it doesn't matter who's at quarterback. You don't have more than 3-4 seconds back there because it's either again, it's kind of a scheme thing. They either drop back pass or they run. There's no in the middle. So to me, that puts a lot more pressure on the quarterback. There's not play action or moving the guy around intentionally, the quarterback. But yeah, I was impressed with Drew Pine, to be honest with you. For a young guy, I mean,
I was
big
too.
stage.
And then let's get Tyler Buckner allegedly is back in the mix.
Yeah,
Brian
the runaround guy. He's a heck of an athlete.
The way Brian Kelly talked this week, this time it finally feels like Buckner is playing, that he's back to his old self. Now, the way he talked about Jack Cohn, I'm feeling like that's like one of those, he's doing better, and then ultimately it's Pine that starts. Here's the thing. Brian Kelly could always surprise us, right?
He does.
But he does like to surprise
things
you.
with quarterbacks, yeah.
But the way he's saying it's going to be either Cohn or Pine is the starter, and then Buckner returns to his role as that change-of-pace guy.
Yeah.
Obviously, Buckner is a much bigger change of pace from Cohn. Pine's in between, but it's not like Pine. You mentioned Ian Book.
Yeah.
The difference between Pine and Ian Book is a much better overall runner than Pine is.
True.
Pine's good at escaping.
Yeah, elusive.
But maybe not going to then bust off a 13-yard run for a first down. But at least he's not a statue like Jack Cohn. So let me ask you this. I would think the answer today is go Pine, Buckner, unless Cohn's 100%. Because even if Cohn is 92%, that means he is worse off. He's less mobile. It's an ankle. He's less mobile than he was.
That's a good point.
He's less mobile than he was the first 4 weeks with this offensive line. It's not Cohn's fault per se
that
the offensive line is this bad, but it is. And so my thinking is Pine Buckner. What's your answer long term for the? Not long term. Long term.
Yeah, long term. Drew Pine should be pretty good for the future. But I'm
saying long term. It's Buckner next year probably. Well, but this year I don't know where you go the rest of the season, or do you not have to worry about answering that because you just see how it all shakes out?
I was so impressed with Drew Pine and how he finished. I would just let it go. I would probably start, unless, again, he can't move at all. I would start with Cohn just because of his experience. And then, Pine knows the role of coming off the bench. Buckner knows the role of being the mix-up guy off the bench. So
they could play three today, technically. Who knows?
It's the new trend, right? I don't know. Everybody's doing it, playing multiple quarterbacks. But I will say this. Brian Kelly's pretty good at playing multiple quarterbacks. He's moved people around and inserted people where you're like, I wouldn't do that. And at the end of the year, that was a great decision.
Well, where did it work most famously? It was actually at Cincinnati. It's what got him the job at Notre Dame.
Yeah, the two quarterbacks.
When he was running that, in 2009, 12 years ago, when it was not the norm to do two quarterbacks, right? So that's when it happened. All right, let's talk about this offensive line. Yeah. They had 3 rushing yards last week against Wisconsin. They still won the game, but 3 rushing yards. Sounds like they finally might get Michael Carmody back at left tackle today.
That'd be really good.
Who knows, because Kelly's kind of said he's a game-time decision for the last couple of weeks. We wait and see. Blake Fisher does not appear to be coming back this year the way Kelly talked this week. He basically parked the brakes and is like, this is a type of injury that could be more long-term. So we're going to wait till the training staff comes to us and tells us he's ahead of schedule. I'm like, ooh, that's a change from saying, we're going to get him back behind the bye week. So what you see is what you got.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how much better they're going to get.
Well, to Kelly's credit, at least as of the last 4 years, they've gotten better and better and better when they identify a weakness and they get better. This is one where it's pretty rough, especially on that left side. You just wonder the personnel. I don't understand totally the fall off, to be honest with you, because I feel like that they're consistently recruiting good enough guys and that they do a good enough job developing people. To Ilya's point last week, they don't do a lot to help those guys. I think, if they go empty and I'm Cincinnati's new defensive coordinator, I'm going to zero blitz them and just make it a race because there's no way those 5 guys, they need the help of a running back at least.
Well,
they
got
at
least they got the help from Kyron last week on that one blitz pickup.
For sure. For sure. I mean, he's a more consistent blocker if you look.
You said that last week. You said he might be their best blocker. All right, let's bring in Ilya. We haven't let him chime in, and he's the one that gave multiple grades that we disagreed with last week, and he proved to be sort of right.
More right.
Well, I mean,
more right than me.
Anyway, offensive line, what's your thoughts on where they're at right now, and do you think they can get some rushing going today?
Well, first of all, let's put some context behind the offensive line issues last week. We all knew that they weren't going to run the ball on Wisconsin last week. I mean, Wisconsin, that's their MO on defense. Today, I'm honestly not sure because I think Cincinnati's strength is the secondary more than the front 7. So if they average like 4 or 5 yards a carry today, I think we're going to have a good day today.
4 or 5 yards a carry.
That would be huge.
I mean, if they average
I said if.
If they average
that would be great.
If they average 3 yards a carry, you'd probably be happy here today. The way they've been playing last week, they had 3 total yards. And the running backs, you take away the sacks, we're still only averaging, I think it was 1.7 yards per carry. Let's hear from Caden Madden on what he has to say about the issues on the offensive line.
When you break down the film, it's not like we're way off. We're just the little things. Right now, it's the biggest thing is just having a more attention to detail to small things and just stop overthinking it. I think we're overthinking it, putting too much pressure on ourselves. Just go and play ball. At the end of the day, it's football.
I mean, people watching on Facebook and YouTube saw my reaction when he said it's just little things. I mean, I don't know what to expect them to say, but I actually wish this offensive line would actually just take ownership of the situation, and instead of saying we're almost there, actually say, we're not playing to the level we want to play, and just take ownership of it. None of them are doing it. Not one. In all the interviews we've had, have actually said we're not playing good enough for this team, and we have to improve. Just own it, and no one's going to complain as much on that end.
Well,
that's my problem.
Yeah, they're not performing well, but I guess if you're looking for a recipe or a roadmap to improve, then they better focus on little things like some of their pass sets or that. He's right. Maybe they are overthinking it because it doesn't make sense to me. They're not consistent across the board, and it can't all be a physical thing. Like they were good recruits. They're good at offensive line development. So they definitely need to pick it up. And, again, that's going to be a huge key. Cincinnati will typically have 3 down linemen, and they'll bring one of their linebackers at least, and they twist and they bring lots of pressure. So it's going to be feast or famine for sure on that side of the ball.
It feels like it was feast or
and
famine.
both.
Right. Everywhere it's feast or famine. All right, big thank you to Tyrac for all the support of our internship program that we run with students from St. Joseph and Marian High Schools here in Michiana. The students receive practical college-level internship experience helping out with our broadcast of high school football. Wouldn't be possible without the underwriting support from the folks at Tyrac. More tires, great prices. Visit TireRack.com. All right, Notre Dame defense. We won't spend a bulk of time here. We'll talk about them probably end the show in terms of facing off with Desmond Ridder. No Kurt Heinisch again this week. They do expect him back next week. Howard Cross played really well in his place. Cam Hart had 2 interceptions, and now here's where we're seeing the defense and that aggressive play working out to their advantage. But let me ask you this, Kevin. Was last week more about the Irish defense or more about Graham Mertz being horrible?
I guess they vastly improved from the first 3 games.
Yes.
In especially that fourth quarter, but even second half. It was the whole game. So I think it's them improving. But you do have to take into account that guy, Mertz, had a rough one. Like the interception. So the first touchdown was the outside receiver on trips came in, caught the ball, scored. Awesome. The next 3 times they did it, there was a pass breakup and then 2 interceptions. It was the same play, and they're thrown to the wide side of the field like, that's amazing. Notre Dame got so much better. No, you're what are you choosing? Why are you doing that?
Well, they're doing Angelo's style when he played quarterback in backyard football. It's like, hey, that run 5 yards.
Do that one again.
Yeah, let's do it again. It worked.
It worked that first time.
And That's what we did in backyard football back in the day. All right, we'll talk about now the Irish defense versus Desmond Ridder later on during our game day sprint. Coming up, we'll dive deeper into the matchup with Cincinnati, including Brian Kelly's thoughts on Desmond Ridder as well. But up next, our conversation with former Irish captain Rocky Boiman. A lot of great stories here. He's from Cincinnati, lives there now, so he knows all about the Brian Kelly, Marcus Freeman storylines, plus some great talk about his days at Notre Dame in the NFL and his face. That's next on Notre Dame Federal Credit Union's Irish Sports Saturdays on Redeemer Radio.
We know you like football. So do we. We're TireRack.com, and this is our version of a 2-minute drill, except it's only 30 seconds. TireRack.com has an enormous selection of tires. Not sure which ones to buy? Use our Tire Decision Guide to find the right tires for your vehicle and the way you drive. Then get them shipped fast and free on all orders over $50. Shipping is in as little as 1 day. Free. TireRack.com ships to independent, recommended installers. TireRack.com, the way tire buying should be. Touchdown!
Indiana Physical Therapy is your choice for physical and occupational therapy. We treat all walks of life, from peewees to professionals, Olympians, and those in between. Schedule at one of our 21 locations without a doctor's order. We accept all insurance plans and have the highest credentialed and most reputable staff. Open 7 to 7 to schedule the same day you call. Indiana Physical Therapy. Call 260-209-2464 or visit indianapt.com, where people go to get better.
Tom's Car Care Center in South Bend is about a lot more than oil changes and car washes. Parishioners at Corpus Christi Church, Tom's Car Care Center is family owned and operated and has served our community since 1988, and we thank them for proudly supporting Redeemer Radio. So stop in for an oil change, grab a sandwich or coffee while you wait, and drive off with a car wash to have your car looking new again. Tom's Car Care Center, the Coffee Spot Cafe, and the Waterworks Car Wash, located at 3201 Sugar Maple Court in South Bend.
Elkhart Bedding believes a good mattress is the key to a good night's sleep, and as a factory outlet, they can save you money too. Elkhart Bedding has been family run and locally owned for more than 100 years, and they believe in giving back to our community. That's why Elkhart Bedding supports Catholic entities like Redeemer Radio and the Apostolate of Divine Mercy in South Bend, and hopes you will too. Elkhart Bedding is located at 2124 Sterling Avenue in Elkhart or at elkhartbedding.com.
Hi, this is Tony Catanzaric from Catanzaric Financial Services. My father and mother, Joe and Mary Catanzaric, lived their lives based on love of God, family, and country. Those values and life priorities can unite our country under God if we do our best to keep the 10 Commandments and treat others as we would like to be treated. If you have any questions about this message or would like help planning your financial future, contact me at tony@catanzaricfinancial.com.
Securities and advisory services offered through Harbor Investment Inc., member SIPC.
This is Leonard DiLorenzo, host of Church Life Today, a production of the McGrath Institute for Church Life at the University of Notre Dame. On Church Life Today, we talk with pastoral leaders and scholars about some of the most important theological, social, and ministerial issues in the church, digging deeper than sound bites or hot takes. If that sounds good to you, join us on Mondays during the noon hour right here on Redeemer Radio, or pick up episodes wherever you get your podcasts or directly at spokestreet.com/churchlife.
Notre Dame Federal Credit Union has been serving the Notre Dame community for more than 80 years. Get a debit or credit card from Notre Dame FCU. Take a little bit of Notre Dame with you wherever you go. Member-owned, not-for-profit banking is the way to go. You raise share values. Why not share in our benefits? Notre Dame Federal Credit Union. Angelo, Carlo, Kevin Downey back with you here. Ilya Glasman chiming in as well throughout the show. But right now it's time for our Focus on Faith interview with Rocky Boiman, former Notre Dame linebacker and captain of the 2001 Notre Dame team. Spent 8 seasons in the NFL, winning a Super Bowl with the Colts. Cincinnati native, he lives and raises his family in his hometown, hosts a daily radio show there in Cincy, and is an ESPN college football analyst. He knows the mood in Cincinnati about today's game, Brian Kelly and Marcus Freeman. We also discuss his days at Notre Dame, a great story about how he almost quit football before winning a Super Bowl. And then also we discuss, of course, his faith, because it is the Focus on Faith interview here with former Notre Dame captain Rocky Boiman. All right, Rock, just give us the mood in Cincinnati this week. Obviously a top 10 showdown. It's a pro town, but is there a lot of buzz for Notre Dame Cincinnati in the top 10 matchup, especially with Brian Kelly and Marcus Freeman and all those intangibles around it?
Yeah, Angelo, it's a great question, and thanks for having me. No, there's certainly palpable buzz here in Cincinnati. As you mentioned, it's definitely a Reds and Bengals town. But within the last couple years, UC and the success that they have had, double-digit wins, I think the last 4 seasons, has really put the Bearcats on the map. And also, to be honest, with the lack of winning from the Reds and the Bengals over the years, this town is just starved for some sort of positive news, some sort of team to get behind. And right now it's the Bearcats. And as you mentioned, just the fact with Brian Kelly's, relationship with UC, and then of course Marcus Freeman, it's definitely shaping up to be a huge game, and something that a lot of fans are talking about.
All right, we'll talk about maybe the game itself a little bit more at the back end, but I did want to ask you about Brian Kelly becoming Notre Dame's all-time wins leader last week. What's his reputation like in Cincinnati at the moment? Obviously, I understand there was bad blood in maybe the way he handled the departure when he first left. Has that dissolved? Are people on good terms? They view him favorably again, or what kind of is the mood of the town in terms of Brian Kelly?
It's an interesting question, because I do feel that there's a lot of just hardcore UC fans that will never forget how Brian Kelly left and their thoughts on that. From my perspective, there's never a good way to leave a program. When do you do it? When do you not do that? And I always ask people, if your absolute dream job, the job you've been dreaming about since you were very, very little, came up, would you not take that job? Of course you would. And just how the semantics of how the seasons and signing periods and all that work, there's no easy way to do it. I don't think it was a fault of Brian Kelly. Maybe could he have done some things differently? Yes, but I think some fans have kind of let it go, but your hardcore Bearcat fans, that still really, really sticks in their craw.
What are your impressions as a Notre Dame alum, a former captain on the football team, of the job that Brian Kelly has done in his time to now pass Knute Rockne, which seems, obviously, as he said, he hasn't won those national championships, but to pass Knute Rockne seems like that would never have happened.
Yeah, I've been very happy with the job Brian Kelly's done, and I know about the futility in the playoff and against top 10 teams and all that, and I always get the question, Angelo, why isn't Notre Dame better? Why can't they break through? And I always answer with, to me, it's amazing that they're as good as they are. I mean, you're talking about a school that's geographically isolated. It's cold. You actually have to go to class. Every school is on TV anymore, so Notre Dame doesn't have that working for them. So it's hard at Notre Dame. You live up there, you know what it's all about. So the fact that they're still in the playoff conversation, if not in the playoff, every year, I think is tremendous. And as far as Brian Kelly goes, okay, is there maybe a better coach out there? Maybe, but who? Name a person right now, not named Urban Meyer, that you would guarantee you bet your life that would come in and do a better job under the circumstances with all the things that Brian Kelly has to deal with. I don't know the name of that coach. Someone you could guarantee would do a better job. So with all that said, I think he's doing a good job.
Rocky Boiman joining us here, former Notre Dame captain and linebacker, now an ESPN analyst, and hosts his daily radio show there in Cincinnati, his hometown. Rocka, let's just talk about you growing up in Cincinnati and your experiences in life, and what was it like being a Cincinnati boy and now being back at home and being able to have your own radio show there, live there, and grow your family in Cincinnati.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, Cincinnati is a great town, especially just kind of the surrounding suburban areas of it. And it's a Catholic town. It's a Notre Dame town, which is a big reason why I told my second grade teacher that I wanted to go to Notre Dame and I wanted to be a captain and I wanted to play football. Notre Dame definitely means something here in Cincinnati. I'm honored to have grown up here and now be back here and raising my family and doing my thing after I retired from the NFL, and to work on the local radio stations, 700 WLW. If you've lived or been around Cincinnati, that's a huge station. And to grow up listening to that station and now have a drive time slot on it Monday through Friday, 3 to 6 is pretty cool.
You mentioned Brian Kelly got his dream job at Notre Dame, and you kind of just hinted at Notre Dame was your dream school. Is that fair to say? And why was that?
I don't know. I think, again, just the fact that, my dad was Catholic, and growing up, Notre Dame is a Catholic town, and he liked Notre Dame. So I was watching Notre Dame games when I was little, so obviously it's hard to not get hooked on Notre Dame when you're seeing the success. Keep in mind, at 8 years old, a very impressionable age, is when Notre Dame won its national championship. So my God, well, that's perfect timing for a guy like me, and who also grew up, loving all the legends and Newt Rockney and the Four Horsemen and all these sort of things, and Ara Parseghian. So I dove into it head first at an early age, and then to be able to go there, and when Bob Davie offered me a scholarship this summer going into my senior year, it was a dream come true, no question.
8-year-old Rocky Boiman, who was his favorite guy?
You got to be a Chris Zorich or Michael Stonebreaker. Come on, like Michael Stonebreaker. If you're a linebacker, a defensive guy like I was, how do you not like Michael Stonebreaker, right? So, some of those guys in those late '80s, early '90s teams are legendary. I remember when I got to meet Chris Zorich, I died and gone to heaven. He and I are speaking at a Notre Dame Club of Chicago event, and I'm like, this is the greatest thing in the world. I'm sitting, and he's probably like laughing because I'm geeking out over here, but it was cool.
During that age range as a young kid, you mentioned your dad's Catholic, and then you eventually go through the RCIA program to become Catholic. What was that experience like for you, Rocky, going through that program and becoming Catholic?
Yeah, it was great. Because I'd kind of grown. I didn't grow up Catholic from youth, but one of the things, to be honest, Angelo, it was very important to my grandfather, my dad's dad, and I'll never. My dad always would tell me. He said, "Your grandpa would always tell me, look, I'm not going to tell you how to raise your son. You're going to do whatever you do, but I really would love for you to raise him Catholic." And it didn't happen early on for whatever reason, but at some point it was almost like him as a son kind of fulfilling his father's wish, right, and kind of encouraging me to do it. And then I went to a public school 1st through 6th grade, but I knew I wanted to go to St. Xavier High School, which was a big Catholic school here in town. And so my parents thought it would be a good idea to start getting into that world a little bit. And then so I went to St. James for 7th and 8th grade here in town, and then got in the RCIA program and got all 3 sacraments there on the Easter Vigil night, which was pretty cool, and got to learn a lot about the church and the religion and everything. And I think it's been great.
Those Easter Vigils are really long.
It's a long one, man. 2 hours or more, yeah.
What was the experience being able to be a part of that and be one of the focal points of it, right? Getting all the sacraments at one time during the Easter Vigil Mass.
Yeah, it was cool because, the whole church is there, and there's only 5 or 6 or 7 people that are going through it. And it's like everyone's watching you, and everyone's happy for you. And it's kind of like you're excited because you're becoming a part of the club officially. You know what I mean? So it was neat. And to me, I'm a guy that likes to live his life by structure. And, some churches are, and nothing against any of them, and they're kind of loose and doing all this and that, but I like kind of things having some order to it, having some structure, and we say this prayer at this time and that prayer at that time. Structure is what is, I think, in general, has helped me to have some success in my life, and I like that about the church.
Rocky Boiman, former Notre Dame captain, joining us here on our Focus on Faith interview and Notre Dame Federal Credit Union's Irish Sports Saturdays. Obviously you had a great career at Notre Dame before you head off to the NFL, but what are the things that stick out in your mind about your days at Notre Dame that you still cherish to this day?
My junior year, we played Nebraska at home. You might remember that game. I think that was like a 1 versus 2 matchup. And so it was a huge game, Frank Solich, Eric Crouch coming in. And I'll never forget warming up for the game, and Jeff Fain, who was one of my good friends, comes in. He'd already been on the field. He goes, "Rock, the whole stadium is red." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "There's a lot of Nebraska fans in the stadium." I was like, "Okay." And I remember going out there, and then obviously by the time the game started, the whole place was packed, and we had a game. It's kind of my game where I kind of arrived. I had a couple sacks and played a pretty good game. We wound up losing that game in overtime, which was absolutely crushing to me, absolutely crushing. I really wanted to win that game, but that was like I felt like I was a part of a big game in Notre Dame history. You know what I mean? All those games I looked up to and watched all my career. I felt like I got to actually to play in one of these big Notre Dame games. So, we had 2 good years when I was there, 2 bad years when I was there, and fighting through some of the adversity with that. But it's a tough place. Notre Dame is a tough place. It's not for everybody. And there's certainly things that you look around, boy, things would be easier if I had gone here, gone there, but I don't regret the decision one bit, because I think at the end of the day, it helped make a man out of me, and I'm very, very proud and thankful I got the opportunity.
Obviously, you had a pretty good career in the NFL, 8 years, and one of those, obviously, a Super Bowl with the Colts. You got to ask about it. Just going through that, have that opportunity to win a Super Bowl, be a part of that. What was that experience like?
Well, I got to tell you, it's kind of a long story, because in my 2006 year was one of the craziest, worst yet most fulfilling years of my life. So I was done with my 4th year with the Tennessee Titans. I was a free agent, and long story short, I wound up signing with the Dallas Cowboys, a 3-year deal. I'm going to go play for America's team. Well, for various reasons, it didn't work out. So long story short, I got cut, and I remember just being absolutely devastated. And I was in my head, I was like, I'm done, man. I just forget this. I was embarrassed. I was sad. I was, the whole thing. And at that particular moment, I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm kind of done with this. And I remember calling my parents, who had been there through my athletic journey my entire life. And I remember talking to my dad, and he said, look, if you want to come home, come on home. No problem. He said, but I just don't think you're done. And it kind of pepped me up, and we kind of thought about it, prayed about it a little bit. And then I got 3 phone calls. I got a call from Jeff Fisher, who was my former coach of the Titans, said, we'd love to have you back. I got a call from a guy named Nick Saban, who was the coach of the Miami Dolphins at the time. And he said, I would love to have you in Miami. And then I got a call from Tony Dungy. And he said, we'd love to have you here. And at the time, Indianapolis being very close to Cincinnati, that appealed to me. Also playing football with Peyton Manning appealed to me. And boom, I shot up there literally that next morning, hit the ground running, and contributed on that team. I started, I think, 3 or 4 games, was a major contributor on special teams, and won a Super Bowl. So the lesson there is, man, you never know. It's about perseverance, and you never know what's going to lie on the other side of that door. And I mean, how sick would I be if you and I were talking right now, Angelo, and I said, yeah, I had a really nice 4-year NFL career, and I got cut by the Cowboys, and I just decided that, man, it was done for me.
Former Notre Dame captain and football player Rocky Boiman joining us here on Notre Dame Federal Credit Union's Irish Sports Saturdays. Rocky, I imagine that's one of the topics you probably talk about in depth in your new book, Rocky's Rules.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's my book, Rocky's Rules. It's the subtitle is A Playbook for Becoming Your Best in Challenging Times. And as I said earlier, I'm a very principled, structured kind of guy, and I think there's certain ways you should live your life. And I think there's certain ways I should live my life, and what's important to me, and kind of reasons why I've been able to accomplish a few things. And so over the years, I would always think about what are the principles that are important to me? What matters to me? And for years, I would send myself text messages or emails or voice things. And you look around, and I got like pages and pages of just stuff, right? Stuff that I've written down and that I think this is important. I don't think that's important. That was kind of the genesis of the book. It's 11 principles. I mean, the first one is prepare, and one day your chance will come. And I tell a story about being with the Titans and being frustrated because I wanted to be a starter and I wasn't. So I kind of let my preparation go down, but then I kind of had a coach kind of jolt me back into reality and get me back to being the guy that was always preparing and always working hard. And in the game, it wound up working out. The starter ahead of me goes down. I jump in the game and wind up having a phenomenal game. And the lesson there is not just for football players, but for anybody. I'm sure there's people out there that are frustrated. There's somebody above them in their corporate job, or somebody above them in their sales department that they know they're better than, and they want to be the guy. But they're trapped right now for whatever reason. And to me, the lesson is just keep preparing, keep working, because your chance will come. I firmly believe that your chance will come. It's just a matter of what you do when you get it.
The book's Rocky's Rules. You can find it on Amazon. Rocky Boiman joining us here on Notre Dame Federal Credit Union's Irish Sports Saturdays. Rocky, what are your impressions of Marcus Freeman? You know, obviously it's been a little bit of a weird start at Notre Dame, but certainly you know him pretty decently from his time at UC. What are your impressions of what he brings to Notre Dame now as their defense coordinator?
Yeah, I know him very well. Marcus is a great guy, great coach, phenomenal recruiter. And I know early on people are saying, wait, what's going on with his defense? But keep in mind, you got guys that got to not just learn a new system and new terminology, they got to unlearn the stuff they've been doing for a couple of years under Clark Lee, right? So there's going to be a transition in there. I thought you started to see it last week with the generation of the turnovers and things like that. What I think Marcus Freeman does best is he puts his best players in positions to make play. He doesn't have a, hey, this is how I do defense. No, he's going to look at his squad. He's going to look at who does what well, and he's going to put those players in position. He's not going to just run some system because that's what he's been running his whole life. I think he does that well. He puts his players in position to make plays, and he does it in a way where they're not out there thinking. They're out there flying around and reacting. So I think it's certainly going to be a great tenure for Marcus Freeman. There'll be some hiccups maybe early on, but in the long term, this is the guy. Trust me.
Finally, how does this one play out between Notre Dame and Cincinnati? Where do you think this one heads? And are you allowed to openly cheer for Notre Dame on your radio program, or you have to couch things? Did you have to couch things this week?
Look, I've been telling, and everybody's, and look, I'm a big UC fan because as I said earlier, I want success in sports in this town. We deserve it. We got great sports fans in Cincinnati, and we haven't experienced any in a long time. But as I've told my listeners, I bleed gold though, man. On this week, I gotta be for the Irish. It really is going to be a great matchup, but I know I'm not saying anything that nuanced here, but it's going to come down to Notre Dame's offensive line because, UC and Myjay Sanders, the defensive end, they got some guys that can flat bring it. And if Notre Dame can find a way to protect and run the ball a little bit, I think they'll have a chance because I like the things Notre Dame is doing defensively. But I mean, just so everyone knows, UC has a real squad. I mean, I follow this team and I've followed them, seen them in person for probably 7 years. They do their training camp literally not 10 minutes from my house. And so you go all the way back to the Tommy Tuberville days at UC and what that team looked like just from the bodies and just how things were being run to what it is now, what I saw before the season. This is a real legitimate Power 5 looking team. I'm talking about just the guys they've recruited and the athletes and things like that. So it's going to be a tough test for Notre Dame. It really is. I'm rooting for my guy, Michael Mayer. He's a local guy from Northern Kentucky. He's got to have a huge game. And I know UC is going to make it priority number one to take him out of the game. If they got to double him, they got to do whatever they got to do. They're going to make sure that Michael Mayer does not beat them. So somebody else on that team is going to have to step up, and I think that's going to be the difference.
Rocky, thank you very much for joining us. Enjoy, well, you won't even get to watch the game, but enjoy maybe watching it on replay later on after whatever game you're doing.
No, I'll actually get to watch it. My game tonight is it's Eastern Washington, so I'm like a 10:30 p.m. game, so I got all morning to watch it. So this is great. But Angelo, I really appreciate you having me on, man. Thank you so much.
All right, that's former Notre Dame captain Rocky Boiman joining us here. Great insight in every aspect. What are some of the highlights for you, Kevin?
Well, obviously the faith component, the RCIA, that was neat. The perseverance story, being close to being out of it. I guess I didn't realize he had such a good run in the NFL. The one thing for me, just personally remembering Rocky Boiman, when I was a young coach, I was really fortunate I got a chance to work at the Notre Dame football camp with a lot of good young coaches. But under Bob Davie, literally our prototype was, let's find another Rocky Boiman type stand-up outside linebacker. These are the attributes. And I remember there was a coach that brought his son over from Iowa, and he was this big, muscular, redheaded kid, and he was like, no, this is it. I'm like, well, okay. I didn't realize Rocky had so much of the defensive back in his past because he was such a stout run defender. But, yeah, it was just neat. I love Cincinnati. I go there all the time and Guy's named Rocky. You can't really beat that for a football name.
That's true. That is generally, and I thought his insight about you've kind of been like, I don't know who Cincinnati's played, and Rocky's pointing out, hey, they're legit, everybody. So, but apparently the fan base of Notre Dame does not think Cincinnati's legit based on the Twitter poll we had on who's going to win here today. We'll get those results. We'll give our previews of what's going to happen here today and our predictions. It's the Game Day Sprint on Notre Dame Federal Credit Union's Irish Sports Saturdays when we return on Redeemer Radio.
Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. The golden rule. When you schedule a financial checkup with Notre Dame Federal Credit Union, our people will be helpful and honest and kind. They will look for ways to save you money, and when your checkup is complete, they will send $150 to Redeemer Radio. For more info, visit NotreDameFCU.com/elevate. You already share our values. Why not share in our benefits? Notre Dame Federal Credit Union.
Support for programming on Redeemer Radio is provided by the DeNicola Center for Ethics and Culture at the University of Notre Dame. The DeNicola Center is committed to sharing the richness of the Catholic moral and intellectual tradition, both on campus and in the wider public square. Learn more about the DeNicola Center and see our schedule of upcoming conferences, lectures, and events at ethicscenter.nd.edu.
Are you struggling to make ends meet or know someone who is? Let the St. Vincent de Paul Society help. From food to clothing vouchers, financial assistance, and even beds for children, the St. Vincent de Paul Society has been helping the community since 1904. Programs are available to residents of St. Joseph County at no cost. For more information, call 574-234-6000 or visit our website at svdpsb.org.
Did you know 1 in 5 Americans will develop some form of skin cancer by the time they're 70? Skin cancer is the most common form of cancer, and it's mainly caused by sunshine. If you can't be in the shade when you're outside this summer, make the most of hats, lightweight clothing, and sunscreen to preserve your healthy skin. If you notice a spot that looks different than anything else on your body, or a non-healing sore that lasts more than a month, see a dermatologist. Such areas are more likely to be skin cancer. I'm Dr. Tom McGovern, skin cancer and reconstructive surgeon who's been practicing at Fort Wayne Dermatology for over 20 years. I've treated over 30,000 skin cancers with Mohs surgery, an outpatient procedure that provides a 99% cure rate for new basal cell skin cancers. If you have skin cancer, my compassionate and skilled team at Fort Wayne Dermatology would be privileged to care for you.
We know you like football. So do we. We're TireRack.com, and this is our version of a 2-minute drill, except it's only 30 seconds. TireRack.com has an enormous selection of tires. Not sure which ones to buy? Use our Tire Decision Guide to find the right tires for your vehicle and the way you drive. Then get them shipped fast and free on all orders over $50. Shipping is in as little as 1 day. Free. TireRack.com ships to independent, recommended installers. TireRack.com, the way tire buying should be. Touchdown!
If you want even more football, our listeners in Fort Wayne can catch St. Francis's home opener against Siena Heights today at noon on 106.3 FM. In Michiana on the high school front, we'll have Marion and Elkhart next Friday night. In the second last game of the regular season, listen on 95.7 FM or watch on Facebook.com/957sports. But, of course, our focus here for the next 7 minutes, and then the rest of the day is Notre Dame Cincinnati top 10 showdown at Notre Dame Stadium. Bearcats 3-0 coming off a bye. We didn't mention that. Yet another team coming off a bye. Yep. Wisconsin was coming off the bye. Didn't work out for them. Notre Dame ranked 9th in the country at 4-0. And we've talked a little bit about Desmond Ridder and his potential, considered a likely first-round NFL pick. Let's listen in on what Brian Kelly had to say when asked this week about what makes Desmond Ridder so dangerous.
He's got the ability to put the ball down the field. I think his deep balls are as good as we've seen in a long time. I mean anybody that we've played in a long time. He throws the ball down the field very, very well. And then his ability to run. I mean, those are the two things that separate him from a lot of the quarterbacks that we've played, is the ability to push the ball down the field, deep balls, and that's what he wants to do, and then his ability to run.
I mean, that combination is very dangerous, and he's a veteran.
Yeah, I was going to say that's also his experiences.
I mean, he's 33-5 as a starter. This guy's been doing this for a long time. That's a very big advantage when you're that good as well. What do you like about him?
I obviously his arm and being able to throw deep and decision making. On some of the design runs, he looked like, wow, that was kind of surprising. And then, really just watching it a couple of times, even when plays break down, he can still make some things happen with his legs. I guess that was surprising to me because he is such a good passer and does make usually quick decisions. So if his offensive line does falter a little bit, he can make things happen.
He has lost quite a bit of yardage because of sacks that have happened because of the offensive line faltering. But if you take away just his rush attempts, he's averaging about 6 yards per carry. He has 24 career rushing touchdowns, 64 career passing touchdowns. This year, 7 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Really good quarterback. And again, that deep ball could be a problem, right? You didn't see that against Wisconsin. They didn't have the ability to go deep. And Cincinnati does with, Tyler Scott, Alex Pierce, Michael Young. They've got some weapons to be able to do that. That might be one of the biggest challenges Notre Dame's defense faces here today is preventing that deep pass, that big play that haunted them in the first 2 weeks.
Well, because besides Kyle Hamilton, it's always a little bit of hold your breath and worry about the matchups, especially deep. But, the skilled guys are good for Cincinnati, but I think it's going to come down to those offensive linemen for that team as well against an aggressive Notre Dame defense.
And in many ways, it's going to come down to the offensive line on both sides of the ball, right? Because the defensive side, Majay Harris, here's a guy that everyone's been planning around, it seems like. His stats aren't that high, but he's considered an NFL prospect, and people have been planning around him. And then the other guy is, when your name is Sauce, that's pretty good. Ahmad Sauce Gardner, considered a shutdown cornerback. Kevin Austin might not be able to get much done here because this guy might be able to shut him down. That could be a problem. Then you got to get other guys involved here today in the pass game.
Well, and again, Kevin Austin's come off of a really big game. I think honestly, yes, good players. Marcus Freeman recruited him, but more than anything, it's almost like scheme over players for this because some of those defensive linemen may pop free because they're blitzing different linebackers and doing twists. And I mean, it's to me, and I know I'm jumping ahead, but the keys to the game for both, whoever wins this, it'll be which offensive line handles the aggressive defensive pressure from the front seven for both defenses.
Well, and to Ilya's point earlier, Cincinnati's defense is giving up 138 rushing yards per game so far. That's to Miami, Ohio, Murray State, and Indiana. So if there's ever a game that you should be able to run the ball, this might be it. All right, Kevin gave his key to the game. What's your key to the game real quick, Ilya?
For me, it's to rattle Ridder. He's asking for it this week. He said that this crowd is going to be loud for too long. So you asked for it, and we're going to bring in this defensive line. Is going to bring in A-plus defensive line, Kevin.
I got to go with defense can't give up the big plays today, and they got to be efficient in the red zone. Cincinnati has been very good in the red zone. 12 of 14 trips, they've scored touchdowns. Notre Dame, 5 of 9 trips to the red zone, scoring touchdowns. That could be a major factor in this game as well. All right, in our Twitter poll, Notre Dame wins by 5 or more, got 60% of the vote.
They're feeling good. That was a great fourth quarter.
What do you got?
I think it's going to be close. 28-21 Notre Dame.
Oh, well, you got Notre Dame by 7. Ilya?
Yeah, just a little fun fact. This is the second time or the first time since 2010 that Notre Dame has been an underdog to a group of 5 team. The team in 2010 they were an underdog to is Utah, who they beat 28-3. I'm going, this isn't going to be close, 38-17 Notre Dame.
Wow. Ooh. I'm going Notre Dame 20-17 after I picked Wisconsin and won last week. I got to go with the Irish here. All right, that'll do it for Notre Dame Federal Credit Union's Irish Sports Saturdays. Notre Dame FCU, where you bank does matter. For Ilya, Kevin, I'm Angelo. Notre Dame Cincinnati, 2:30 kickoff on NBC. We'll see you next Saturday here at Notre Dame Federal Credit Union's Irish Sports Saturdays.
Hi, this is Father Nate Wills. I'm a Holy Cross priest, a faculty member at Notre Dame's Alliance for Catholic Education, and one of the chaplains to the Notre Dame football team. This is a prayer that the players pray together at the end of our pregame Mass. Let us pray. Grant, we beseech you, O Lord our God, that we may enjoy continual health of mind and body, and by the glorious intercession of Mary, Our Lady, may we accept the joys and trials of this life and someday enter into eternal happiness. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Go Irish!
This has been a presentation of Redeemer Radio Sports. Thanks for joining us